My husband Taylor is a real piece of work. Despite borrowing $50,000 from my dad, he's not only avoiding repayment but also considering filing for bankruptcy to dodge it. If I declare bankruptcy, I don't have to pay it back, right? Serves him right, he says, as smug as can be. He really has no idea what life would be like after bankruptcy. I'm Michelle, 32 years old. Taylor and I have been married for 5 years, and for better or worse, we've led an average life together. We don't have kids, but we have a dog instead. We mostly spend our time with each other and our furry friend. Seeing our families is rare since they live far away, so we usually visit them during summer or Christmas vacations. Taylor always makes a fuss when it's time to go to my parents' home. Hey Taylor, you're coming with me to my parents' house for the holidays, right? Oh no, if we're going anywhere, let's go to my parents' place. We've been to your parents many times. It's time we go to mine. We've talked about this. It's just a hassle. And there's nothing to do at your parents' house. Don't you think you should apologize to my dad about the money? Our life is possible because of him. He even helped us with that debt crisis. Again with that? You're so annoying. Taylor sighed loudly and left the room. When we first got married, my dad gave us the down payment for our house and later lent Taylor part of the capital for his startup business. I've been slowly repaying the money for the house, but the $50,000 Taylor borrowed for his business remains unpaid. I know Taylor's business is struggling and times are tough, but that's a different issue altogether. Taylor's lack of gratitude towards my dad irks me every day. Then one day, something happened. I got a rare phone call from my mom, who usually only texts. Hello, Mom. Is now a good time? Yeah, I'm fine. You usually text. What's up? Actually, your dad, Daniel, collapsed. Dad collapsed? You're joking. He wasn't feeling well for a few days. He's stable for now, but if you can, could you come home? I get it. I'll talk to Taylor and head back home as soon as possible. When I explained the situation to Taylor, he reluctantly agreed to the trip just this once. But there's another issue I have to think about, Rocky. I called our regular vet to board him, but they're fully booked, I said. So what's the plan? I'm thinking of hiring a pet sitter. At my words, Taylor let out an exasperated sigh. What? A pet sitter? Give me a break. I can't stand the idea of a stranger in our home. We don't have a choice. Rocky needs his walks, his bathroom breaks, his meals. Absolutely not. They'll be fine for a day. Stop relying on services like that. Are you kidding me? If we leave him alone for a day, he'll get stressed out. We couldn't find common ground, and the conversation was going nowhere. Then Taylor seemed to have an idea and exclaimed, I've got it. I've thought of something great. What is it? Why not ask Isabella? Why would Isabella be involved? She just got divorced, right? And she's been complaining about not having work. Let's ask her to take care of Rocky. While we were gone, we decided to ask Isabella to look after Rocky as a part-time job. Honestly, I was completely against it. The last time Isabella visited, money disappeared from my wallet. I had withdrawn $300 that morning, and by the time Isabella left, it was gone. When I told Taylor, he dismissed it, saying it must be a misunderstanding. Since I had no concrete evidence, I couldn't do much, but I was certain it was Isabella. I didn't trust her and didn't want her in our home. However, with the trip back home imminent and Taylor firmly against hiring a pet sitter, we were out of options. We ended up asking Isabella. I gathered my always ready stash of $3,000 and gift cards, hiding them in a drawer. I slipped a piece of paper into the drawer to know if anyone opened it, and of course, I didn't tell Taylor. Otherwise, I couldn't feel at ease letting Isabella into our home. We asked Isabella to take care of our dog and headed to my parents' house. Thankfully, Dad's condition stabilized and we could talk to him. When we returned, I told Taylor about the drawer trick. As expected, the paper had fallen and $2,000 along with gift cards were missing from the $3,000. I had told Isabella not to enter the bedroom, but I had suspected she might steal something. I sighed and told Taylor, "See, now do you get why I didn't want Isabella in our home?" Well, she's having money troubles too, so a little bit off. Cut it out. We're not exactly rolling in it either, Taylor. You owe money to Dad, remember? That's a different issue. Just call Isabella over here now. Taylor reluctantly dialed her number. When Isabella arrived and we confronted her about the money, she admitted to everything, including the previous time with my wallet. She promised to pay it back, and we let her go. But my anger hadn't subsided. Taylor then sat down next to me. I'll make sure Isabella doesn't come around anymore. But what you did was jaw-dropping, Michelle. You're surprisingly mean-spirited. Setting up a trap like that for Isabella isn't something a grown adult should do. Wait a minute. Are you taking your own sister's side even after all this? Isabella's in the wrong too, but what really turned me off was how you doubt your own family and set up such an elaborate scheme. Don't joke around. If you believe me about her stealing money last time, maybe we could have prevented this. Just like you don't want the pet sitter in our house, I don't want Isabella in our house. Well, you're so narrow-minded. Don't you have anything else to say before blaming me? It felt like he was saying it was my fault for setting up a trap to catch Isabella, who had stolen twice. I was angry and frustrated. After that, Taylor's and my relationship started to deteriorate, with more and more days of not speaking. The tipping point came when Taylor handed me a piece of paper after returning from work. What's this? You know what it is. Divorce papers. You want a divorce. I've had enough of you over this Isabella thing. I don't want to be with you anymore. There's no point in being married. Let's divorce. This happened because of your sister, you know. Don't shift the blame onto me. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. Just sign it. No discussion, just Taylor pushing his own viewpoint. I grew disgusted with him and agreed to the divorce. It was clear Taylor would keep taking Isabella's side in the future, so I figured it was best to cut ties with him sooner rather than later. A few days later, the divorce went through. We sold the house we lived in for 5 years and barely divided our assets. I told Taylor to use that money to keep making monthly payments on his debt to Dad, and he agreed. And so our married life came to an end. Months later, Dad passed away from illness, and just like that, I inherited the right to collect Taylor's debt repayments. But the following month, Taylor fell behind. I did a little digging through mutual friends and found out his business was failing. He had mentioned he was struggling with the company just before we divorced. Knowing Taylor was in trouble, I decided to give him a break and wait 1 more month. However, when there was still no transfer from Taylor, I lost patience and called him. Hello, it's Michelle. What's up, Michelle? What do you need? What do you mean? What do I need? It's about repaying Dad. You haven't paid since last month. Oh, is that all? Well, I'm not paying anymore. Excuse me. Caught off guard by his unexpected response, my thoughts froze for a moment. Taylor, without any remorse, continued. Why should I? My father-in-law's dead, right? No point in paying back a dead man. What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. I inherited Dad's right to collect the debt. So now I'm the creditor. Understand? I don't care. I said I'm not paying. I can't pay. Suddenly furious, Taylor started yelling over the phone. I'm struggling with my business too, you know. Why should I repay a debt to a dead person? It's a waste of money. Don't joke around. How can you even say that? Your current business exists because of Dad. Yeah, sure, he helped back then. But he's dead now. Only you would benefit if I repaid the debt. So why would I do that? At that moment, rage surged through my veins. Our parting wasn't amicable, and I knew about his current economic situation. If only he would sincerely apologize for the delayed repayment, but he was showing no remorse, let alone an apology. Worse still, he seemed to think he was off the hook for repayment now that Dad was gone. I was infuriated by Taylor's convenient thinking. I wouldn't let this go. He would repay every penny. Just to clarify, Dad's death doesn't absolve you from repayment, I said in a stern voice. Annoying, Taylor muttered irritably. I told you, only you benefit from me paying back. There's no way I'm paying back $50,000. All right, then I'll take appropriate measures. Is that okay? Suddenly, Taylor erupted in laughter over the phone. Then I'll just file for bankruptcy. Bankruptcy. Yeah, if I file for bankruptcy, I won't have to pay back anything. Serves you right. You think that will save you? You better repay. You're just trying to get money out of me. I can't possibly pay back that amount. So you never intended to repay it. If the business had gone well, sure, I would have paid. But it didn't. Not even sorry towards Dad. Why should I apologize to a dead person? Both you and your sister are irresponsible with money. Disappointing. Say what you want. I've got my trump card. Bankruptcy. Fine, go ahead and file for bankruptcy, but you'll regret it. Thanks for the advice. Bye. With that, he happily hung up the phone. Taylor seemed to think that filing for bankruptcy would free him from his debt, but he failed to consider the downsides that come with it. If declaring bankruptcy wiped out all your debts, everyone drowning in debt would be doing it happily. I had a friend who had to declare bankruptcy because they co-signed a loan once. It was a heart-wrenching process, and I saw the struggle up close. So I knew how tough bankruptcy could be, and I decided not to tell Taylor about it. Later, it seemed Taylor really did go through with the bankruptcy process. I got a text saying, "Debts are gone. Serves them right." I didn't reply. I just waited to see how things would play out, pretty much expecting Taylor to self-destruct. A few weeks later, just as I expected, a desperate call came in from Taylor. "Michelle, please help me. Long time no see. What's up?" "I'm screwed. Yeah, I got rid of my debts, but now I can't even live a normal life." "Oh, that's unfortunate." "Unfortunate? You don't get it. I'm really in trouble here." Well, declaring bankruptcy is a last resort only for those with no other options. Taylor, who clearly didn't understand the situation, needed it spelled out plainly. Listen, bankruptcy is the last resort. They'll take all your assets, cars, electronics, everything. Your credit cards won't work and you'll be blacklisted. How do you know all this? I saw a friend go through it. It was a nightmare. What? So you knew this would happen and you didn't stop me? Are you finally getting it? This is no joke. I thought I could just reset my debts and get back to normal life. This isn't what I envisioned. Not my problem. It is your fault. If you told me how hard bankruptcy is from the start. At this point, Taylor was trying to shift the blame, so I gave him a reality check. Don't you get it? You made the choice without doing any research, even after I warned you. You made your bed, now lie in it. And you're asking for help now? That's pretty cheeky. I'm your ex-husband in need. Isn't that enough? Ex-husband. You didn't even show up to Dad's funeral, and you've never been grateful for anything. Why would I help trash like you? Karma's a bitch, isn't it? Trash? Who are you calling trash? Just to make it clear, you're in a really bad spot right now. Don't expect to live like you used to. Bankruptcy doesn't offer a bright future. You chose this path. Now live with it for the rest of your miserable life. You damn fool. I let out all my pent-up frustration and hung up the phone. I immediately blocked his number and blocked him on social media. That's how I finally cut off all ties with Taylor. As for him, word has it that he's living a pretty miserable life. He thought he could just wipe the slate clean with bankruptcy and start fresh. He may have acted like he had it all together, but reality isn't that kind. Since he's on the blacklist, he obviously can't get a loan for anything. On top of that, it seems he owed a lot of money to his friends and hasn't paid them back. He's been contacting other friends to borrow money, but no one will lend him anything now that they know his situation. In fact, almost all of his friends have cut ties with him, and it seems he's living a lonely life now. It's nothing less than poetic justice. As for Isabella, it turns out she wasn't just stealing from me, but also from her friends. Apparently, she was recently arrested by the police. The rumors spread in the neighborhood, and she lost her job too. I'm so relieved to see those two people I can't stand both get their comeuppance. I'm really glad I got a divorce when I did. I'll never have to deal with those siblings again. If I ever date someone in the future, I won't make the same mistakes. I'm determined to be more discerning in judging people and building better relationships. Laid up with a high fever, so weak I couldn't move, I asked my eldest son to bring me a glass of water. I thought he would at least do this much for me. But instead, he brought a glass full of beer and splashed it on me as I lay bedridden. From the direction of the door, I heard laughter. There she was, my son's wife, clapping and laughing. My eldest son joined in, holding the empty cup. I couldn't believe it. Despite my feverish and dazed state, that scene burned clearly into my memory. Clean the house by the time we get back, huh? I had tolerated Mark and his wife's selfishness up to now, but this was too much. Yes, I will clean it, I said, enduring the pain in my throat so they could hear me. My name is Helen. I'm a 73-year-old housewife. My husband George, 75, is now retired and teaches calligraphy to children at a nearby community center. He had always dreamed of opening a calligraphy class after retirement, and it made me happy to see him realize his dream and head to the center with a smile every day. We have 2 sons. Our younger son is married with 2 elementary school-age children. However, our 44-year-old eldest son, Mark, was unmarried and living with us. He works part-time at a convenience store at night, but only about 4 days a week. He doesn't contribute any money to the household and leads a lazy life. Despite several warnings from both my husband and me, Mark didn't listen. He wasn't gambling or in debt, so eventually, we stopped warning him. One day, out of the blue, Mark announced he got married and brought his wife home without even greeting us. She barged in as if it was the most natural thing in the world. From that day on, I had to prepare meals for her as well. I didn't mind cooking for her, but she didn't help at all. Nor did she clean up after meals or even say thank you. She even demanded a cup of coffee after dinner. My husband, unable to watch any longer, harshly warned them, and they stopped making unreasonable demands in his presence. However, when he wasn't around, she would start again, asking me to take her dress to the cleaners and other such requests. When I warned her, Mark would take her side, saying, "It's just something you can do on your way to shopping. Don't be so stingy." Despite feeding both Mark and his wife for free, they never contributed a penny to the household. Their demands seemed unreasonable, but I hesitated to talk to my husband about it, not wanting to cause a parent-child quarrel. So I decided to wait and see a little longer. Today, as per my daughter-in-law's request, I took her clothes to the cleaners. My husband and I usually visit our younger son's family in Canada about twice a year. We were planning to visit again during the upcoming week-long federal holiday. Since we visit frequently and they also occasionally come to see us, our grandchildren have become very fond of us. We had already bought toys as gifts and were planning to buy a roll cake as a souvenir. When visiting our son's family, we often take the sleeper train rather than the plane, enjoying the scenery along the journey. Now that we have more leisure time, the train ride soothes us better. The day before our visit, feeling unusually excited, I went shopping after seeing my husband off to his regular calligraphy class. On my way back, I stopped by a cake shop where they sold handmade cookies. Figuring the cookies would last longer than the cake, I bought some for the grandchildren. As I made my way home, it began to drizzle. Hurrying home, the rain gradually became heavier. I decided to stop by a nearby convenience store to buy an umbrella. But by the time I arrived, my clothes were soaked. I considered waiting out the rain at the store, but not knowing when it would stop and wanting to warm up my chilled body in a hot bath, I bought an umbrella and hurried home. When I got home and was about to take a bath, my eldest son's wife came in and said, "Helen, are you about to take a bath? I have to go out now. Let me use the bath first. Helen, please start preparing dinner early," and she closed the bathroom door behind her, even though it wasn't her house. I changed clothes and started preparing dinner, trying to ignore her. While cooking, I started sneezing. It would be bad if I caught a cold right before our departure tomorrow. But my eldest son's wife, who had been in the bath for a long time, did not come out for over an hour. The next morning, the day we were supposed to visit our second son's family, I woke up feeling sluggish. My throat hurt and my nose was running. When I checked my temperature, it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Realizing that I had indeed caught a cold from yesterday's rain, I told George to go alone this time because I didn't want to pass my cold on to the grandchildren. George suggested canceling the visit, but we already had the sleeper train tickets. We also had the toys we bought as gifts for the grandchildren. So I insisted George visit our second son's family, even if it was just him. I gave him the cookies I bought at the cake shop the day before. Despite George's concern, I reassured him that it was just a slight fever and a minor cold, and that I would be okay after taking some medicine and resting at home. George usually doesn't talk much to our eldest son and his wife, but that day he told them I was feeling under the weather and made them promise to take care of the housework. After seeing George off with a smile, I was about to go back to bed when I heard my eldest son and his wife talking. "Oh, such a hassle. It's just a cold, right? But now that Dad's gone, we can be free for a while." I couldn't believe this was coming from the people who were living in our house without contributing to the expenses. But it was typical for them. You do realize the only reason you're able to live here is thanks to your father, right? When I pointed this out, Mark and his wife took offense, retorting, "We're doing you a favor by living with you in your old age." That's right. Normally, everyone hates living with their in-laws, my daughter-in-law added. It's ironic, as they're the ones who moved in with us without being asked. Yet they act as though they're doing us a huge favor. Despite feeling sluggish and wanting to rest, I ignored the remarks and returned to my room. That evening, my daughter-in-law came into my room and woke me up. "Mother-in-law, you're not planning on skipping cooking just because you're feeling a little sick, are you? You know I can't cook, right? Telling your mother-in-law to cook because you can't isn't something a 35-year-old woman should say." I was feeling sick and wanted them to figure out their meals themselves. Even my husband should have warned them before leaving in the morning. I tried to ignore them and go back to sleep, but my daughter-in-law wouldn't leave the room. I thought it would be better to eat something light and take medicine, so I forced myself to get up and head to the kitchen to prepare some food. As I was preparing the meal, Mark came home. Despite seeing me in the kitchen wearing a mask, he didn't utter a word, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Not only that, but he also demanded, "Hey, the bath isn't ready yet." It didn't matter to Mark and his wife whether I was sick or not. Knowing they wouldn't listen anyway and wanting to rest as soon as possible, I finished preparing the meal and went to prepare the bath. When I returned to the living room, Mark and his wife were having a lively conversation while eating. "We're going on a trip abroad the day after tomorrow, so please don't spread your cold to us." Surprised by their sudden mention of a trip abroad, I ate a light meal in the dining room, away from the warm living room, as my daughter-in-law suggested. In the living room, the couple was excited about their upcoming trip abroad. Mark was taking time off his part-time job, and they were going on a 3-week trip to Europe. I hadn't heard anything about them going on a trip abroad, but I was grateful they wouldn't be home starting the day after tomorrow. On the morning of the day Mark and his wife were about to leave for their trip, my cold had worsened to the point where I couldn't get out of bed. When I measured my temperature with the thermometer, I had nearly a 103-degree Fahrenheit fever. I was thirsty, but my headache was so severe that I couldn't even lift my head. In this state, Mark came to me. "Hey, cook us some food. You can still cook even if you have a cold." Tears welled up in my eyes at the sight of my son telling his sick mother to cook. "Eat out," I managed to say. At my words, Mark frowned but said nothing and started to leave the room. Before he left, I asked him to bring me a glass of water. I thought he would at least do that much for me, so I waited. But what Mark brought me was a glass full of beer, and he splashed that beer all over me as I lay bedridden with a high fever. From the direction of the door, a loud laughter echoed. When I turned to look, it was my eldest son's wife, clapping her hands in amusement. In front of me, my son Mark was also laughing, holding the empty cup. It was unbelievable. Although I was feverish and dazed, that sight burned clearly into my memory. "Make sure you clean the house before we get back, haha." I had tolerated Mark and his wife's selfishness up to now, but I couldn't stand it any longer. "Yes, I'll keep it clean," I mustered the strength to say loud enough for them to hear despite the pain in my throat. After that, Mark and his wife cheerfully left the house. I didn't even have the energy to wipe the beer-soaked mess from my face, and I fell asleep as I was. When I woke up, I felt somewhat refreshed, though my head was groggy. I remembered being splashed with beer by Mark, but surprisingly, I didn't feel sticky at all. The covers on my bed were also changed. Just as I was questioning what had happened, my husband George came in with a basin. Seeing me sitting up, he placed his hand on my forehead and asked, "Are you okay?" Why is George here? Wasn't he supposed to be with our second son's family? I tried to ask but couldn't voice it out. Noticing my confusion, George began to explain. He had taken a sleeper train to visit our second son's family, but he was worried about me and decided to return early. He didn't trust Mark and his wife to take care of me. Our second son's family also suggested he hurry back, so he flew home. When he arrived, he found me lying exhausted in bed with a strange smell of beer lingering around. He quickly cleaned my face with a damp towel, tidied up the area, and cared for me while I slept for a full day. When George asked me what had happened, I tried to explain, but my voice failed me. The memory of being splashed with beer by Mark brought tears to my eyes. Seeing this, George brought me some water and said, "Sorry, I shouldn't have asked you now. Just rest for now." He then went to prepare me some porridge. It turned out he had prepared the porridge so it would be ready whenever I woke up. The kindness of George brought tears to my eyes again. Thanks to George's care, I regained my energy in about 2 days. When I told George what had happened while he was gone, his face turned stern. "I can't stand it anymore. Yes, me too. 3 weeks passed since Mark and his wife left for their overseas trip. While I was enjoying peaceful days with George, my phone rang. It was a call from Mark. Here it comes, I said, pressing the answer button. What the hell? Why is our house gone? Well, didn't you say to clean the house? After I recovered from the cold, I told George everything about Mark and his wife's actions. How they forced a sick me to take care of things, how they threw beer on me while I was bedridden with a high fever, and how they went on an overseas trip themselves. After hearing my story, George muttered, I can't stand it anymore. Until now, I had always been the one to calm George down. But after this incident, I didn't feel like pacifying him anymore because I myself couldn't forgive them. Actually, George and I had been secretly planning to build a new house without telling our eldest son and his wife. The house isn't finished yet, but we moved into a monthly rental apartment and sold our house in order to stun them with the news. We have been told that someone wanted to buy our land to build a shop, so the sale happened quickly. Originally, we had planned to keep the old house for our eldest son and his wife. But after the way they treated us, there was no need to consider them anymore. The place has already been turned into an empty lot, so they must have been shocked to find the house gone. The new house will be completed in about 2 weeks. A carpenter we know has allowed us to store our belongings and furniture there in advance as we've explained the situation to him. We disposed of all of our eldest son's and his wife's belongings. When we told them this, our eldest son shouted, Are you kidding me? I'll report you to the police. His wife was also yelling in the background. At that moment, George took over the phone and I switched it to speaker mode. He said to our eldest son in a low voice, Go ahead, tell the police. I'll tell them too. You guys threw beer at your sick mother, then went on a vacation abroad, and even forced her to do housework while she was sick. Who do you think is the bigger sinner, you guys or us for disposing of your things? My husband's face as he spoke to our eldest son was like a villain's. This has nothing to do with that. Selling the house. Where are we supposed to live? Where are you guys even staying? Our son yelled back. George replied, That house was originally ours. It's our right to sell it. Plus, you're no longer our son. Don't contact us anymore. And then he hung up. 2 weeks later, we got a call saying that our new house was completed, so George and I headed over. The call was from the carpenter, a friend of George's. He's about 60 years old and the site supervisor. He showed us around the house, explaining the layout. We designed it as a single-story accessible house, keeping our future retirement life in mind. It's an even more beautiful house than we imagined, and we couldn't wait to start living there. The furniture we had left in the living room had been moved by the carpenters. When I thanked them, they said, No problem. George really helped us out back in the day, so this is nothing. And so the two of us, George and I, started living in our new house. The house was even more comfortable than we had imagined, and our life was peaceful without our eldest son and his wife around. However, about a month after we moved into the new house, our devilish eldest son and his wife showed up. Neither George nor I had told them our address, and our younger son Mark and his wife shouldn't have told them either because we explained the situation. They'd probably hired a detective or something to find us. Hey, it's not fair for you to sell the house, dispose of our stuff, and then move to such a nice place by yourselves. As your eldest son, I have the right to live here, don't I? Our son said, glaring at us with large bags in his hands. We had intended to cut off ties with them, but we were stunned to see our eldest son and his wife, who were clearly intent on moving in. Just then, voices came from the back of the house. What are you guys here for? To what end? After taking our living place, how dare you ask such a thing? From today, we're living here too, our son said. As they were about to step in, the front door opened. Huh, Mark? What are you doing here? Here to cause trouble again? Come on, you're old enough to stand on your own 2 feet, Stephen said with a look of disbelief on his face. Beside him were his wife and their 2 grandchildren. They were visiting because the new house had just been finished. After relaxing at home for a while, Stephen's family had gone to a nearby convenience store. Who is that? Are they bad people? 5th grader Sophia asked innocently. My husband, who had just been about to drive Mark and his wife away, suddenly had an idea. While Stephen's family is staying for a week, you two should also stay here. I won't allow you to squat here indefinitely, though. With that, he welcomed everyone at the entrance into the house. The living room gathered, and the first to lounge on the sofa were Mark and his wife. "Man, I'm beat. Mother-in-law, can I have some coffee?" "I'll take mine black," Mark said casually. Stephen's wife was taken aback by the casually made request of Mark and his wife. At this, the grandchildren rushed to Mark and his wife. "Why can't you two do that yourselves when you're adults? Even I, a kid, can pour my own juice." The innocent comments of the grandchildren made Mark's wife uncomfortable, and she went to pour her own coffee. However, the grandchildren's why attacks continued. "Why can't you cook even though you're an adult woman? My mom can cook anything. Why don't you clean up after yourself? Both my dad and I always clean up the plates when we're done eating. Why can't you do that? My sister and I always do it ourselves." The grandchildren, perhaps due to the good upbringing by Stephen's wife, were responsible and often helped her. Stephen also didn't just leave everything to his wife, they worked together. Therefore, it was probably perplexing for the grandchildren that Mark and his wife didn't do anything themselves. At first, Mark and his wife had retorted, but the why attacks didn't stop, and by the end of the week, they were both exhausted. Mark's wife in particular seemed to dislike being called auntie. "Don't call me auntie," she told her grandchildren in earnest. But when they replied, "Why not? You're an auntie, aren't you? You're not young enough to be called sister," she was shocked. Even I and Stephen, who were listening nearby, couldn't help but laugh. After Stephen and his wife left, we sent Mark and his wife away. They were worn out by the children's incessant why attacks, so we were able to drive them away without much resistance. However, a few months later, we received a message asking, "Can you lend us some money?" Up until now, they had been staying in our home, eating our food without paying a cent in rent or living expenses. Since Mark, our oldest son, was making enough money from his convenience store job to cover all expenses, it wasn't a problem at all. Now that they had been kicked out of the house, Mark and his wife were supposed to start paying for their own rent and living expenses. Yet, they kept spending money as they used to, seemingly living off borrowed money without any savings to speak of. Their only income was Mark's salary from working at a convenience store 4 days a week. Mark's wife seemed to have no intention of working. Considering their situation, it was audacious to say the least for them to ask, "Can you lend us some money?" "We will never lend you money in the future, nor will we help you," we told them, and then blocked Mark's number. A few days later, while my husband and I were out, we received a call on my husband's phone from our home security company. There was an intruder in our house, and they sent us the video footage. It turned out that Mark and his wife were trying to sneak into our house through a window. It was pitiful that they were resorting to breaking into their parents' house to steal money because they were broke. At least they hadn't caused trouble for others, but that's not saying much. Mark and his wife were quickly apprehended by the security and were taken away by the police, who were called to the scene. They were released because they were family, but not before being harshly scolded. Since then, Mark and his wife stopped forcing their way into our house or trying to break in. We have both blocked their calls, so we never receive phone calls from them. According to Stephen, our second son, he also received a request for money from Mark. Apparently, Mark had borrowed money from loan sharks and was now on the run because he couldn't pay it back. "You reap what you sow. Pay back the money you borrowed yourself," Stephen said, and blocked Mark's number as well. We don't know what happened to Mark and his wife after that, but we chose to forget about the people who left us as they poured beer over a sick person with no involvement with Mark and his wife. My husband and I are enjoying our peaceful everyday lives. My husband used to teach calligraphy classes at the nearby community center, but now he teaches at home in a room we designed for that purpose. When Stephen and his family come to visit, the grandchildren and other children take calligraphy classes together, and they seem to be having a good time making friends. I am grateful for these peaceful days and am making the most of each day. The room fell silent at her words, and the adults exchanged uncertain glances. My sister, attempting to diffuse the tension, was about to intervene, but I stopped her. "Why?" she asked. "Because the lumberjack is giving him a scary look and I can't see his face. There's too much hair. I'm Sophia. We live as a family of 5, my parents, my sister, and my niece. My sister lost her partner to illness and returned home with my 2-year-old niece, Emma. Since then, we've all pitched in to raise Emma. Luckily, I work from home, so I take care of Emma during the day while my parents and sister are busy. I own my own company but don't have any employees. I started it by myself and generate income from a game app I developed during my student days. It became popular, and subsequent app releases have been consistently successful. Now I have a stable income. My sister worries about me, a recluse who rarely leaves the house. Sophia, you know you could move out, right? Why would I? Isn't it time for you to experience living alone or something? Not really. Are you worried about us? Huh? You've been helping with Emma since we moved back. With your income, you could afford a fancy city apartment. A city apartment? No thanks. But enough. What's your point? You're still young. What about romance? Romance? Not interested. Being with Emma is all the comfort I need, so don't worry about me. And it's true, I adore my niece. I've never had any interest in romantic relationships. I just want to be there for Emma, who is the child of my sister, whom I deeply respect. I openly admit I really care about my sister and would do anything for her. I've even chased away countless worthless guys who approached my sister like a loyal dog. Among them, my brother-in-law was the only one I thought I could trust to take care of my sister. Losing him was hard on her, and I want to be there for her. Both my sister and Emma mean the world to me. My niece is quite mysterious. When we spend time together, she occasionally does something odd. When she was just 2 years old, she would suddenly wave her hand as if saying goodbye. Initially, I thought she was dancing along with the TV, but she did it even when the TV was off, laughing as she waved. I mentioned this to my sister, but she couldn't recall any relevant incidents. One day, I asked my niece, "Are you saying goodbye to someone?" She nodded. Then, in the next moment, she pointed behind me. My spine involuntarily stiffened. A child waving at nothing, stories like that circulate. Things unseen by adults are visible to children. But having her point behind me was unsettling. Still, my niece's laughter reassured me. When she started speaking, I asked her, "Who are you waving to?" "A lumberjack." "A lumberjack? Who?" She loves books, and lately she's been asking me to read stories about lumberjacks. I understood that she saw someone resembling a lumberjack. Now it's routine for her to wave at this unseen figure, and my fear has faded. When my niece turned 8, the lumberjack's true identity was revealed. That summer, during a visit to my maternal grandparents' house, I was cleaning the storage shed. My niece, eager to help, pointed at a photograph in the shed. "Look, it's the lumberjack," she exclaimed. "The lumberjack?" "Yes, it's the lumberjack." Confused, I studied the photo she indicated. "This person is the lumberjack." She nodded. "Yes, he visits you sometimes." I chuckled. "Actually, that's not the lumberjack. He's your mom's and my grandpa, and instead of a lumberjack, he was a hunter." "What's a hunter?" "Someone who receives the spirit of a bear." "Ah, I see. A hunter looks like a lumberjack," she observed. Indeed, there's a resemblance. The figure my niece saw was my late grandpa. It warmed my heart. My grandpa passed away when I was in middle school, but I was very close to him. He had been a traditional bear hunter and taught me about bear behavior and hunting. Citing the mountain god's wrath, he didn't take me along because I was a young girl. However, I learned how to handle bears and extract oil. Even now, it feels like he's watching over us. During this time, I had an encounter with a certain man. It happened while I was giving a lecture on app development at the request of a friend. The man who approached me, eyes shining as he looked at the app I developed, was Michael. Although he worked as a regular employee in a corporate company, he attended the lecture because he wanted to explore app development as a side gig. "Can I create popular apps like you, ma'am?" "Well, once you learn the programming languages, it's mostly a matter of practice. There's limitless potential." We exchanged only a few words initially, but afterward, I became close to him as he attended my lectures repeatedly, and we eventually started dating. Until then, I had no interest in romance, but his graceful demeanor captivated me. One day, Michael asked me to meet him at a nearby cafe because he had something to discuss. As soon as I arrived, I noticed the weight on his shoulders. "I'm sorry for bothering you when you're busy, but I needed to see you." His story was heavy. His mother was seriously ill with little time left. There was a chance that advanced medical treatment could save her, but it required funds. Unfortunately, without insurance, he couldn't afford it. It's a tough situation. With $35,000, I might be able to help my mom. I encouraged him, "Please do whatever you can. And remember, sometimes just talking about it can ease the burden." But then he hesitated, saying, "Still, $35,000 isn't easy to come by." He'd been working for over 10 years, so not having $35,000 in savings seemed surprising. Saving $3,500 per year shouldn't be too difficult given your job. "Michael, don't you have any money after all these years?" "No, it's not like that, but $35,000 feels like a huge sum." "Sorry, I still don't understand. Do you have $35,000 or not?" Michael hesitated and then said, Yes, I do." "Well then, it's not a problem. Use it for your mom as soon as possible," I reassured him. Unexpectedly, he changed the topic. "If I use that money, we won't be able to have a wedding, will we?" Surprised, I asked, "What?" Michael confessed, "I want to marry you, Sophia." It was an unforeseen proposal. Marriage, something I hadn't actively considered, suddenly felt significant. But right now, there were more pressing matters. Sure, if I were to get married, I'd want it to be with you. But I'm not the type for big weddings, so I think a simple engagement party would suffice. Even though we call it an engagement, it's really just a formality. We can just gather our families for a meal. So go ahead and use that $35,000 for your mom. I have a decent income too, so there won't be any financial worries after we're married. You can rest assured." "Thank you," he replied. 3 months after that incident, I was relieved to hear that Michael's mother began to recover thanks to advanced medical treatment. Once again, Michael proposed marriage, and I accepted. I had thought we would visit each other's parents' homes to exchange greetings. However, since his parents' house is company housing and they'd like to avoid becoming the subject of neighborhood gossip, we decided not to visit their house. Instead, we held the meeting at a restaurant to avoid inconveniencing him. I also refrained from inviting him to my home. My parents, Michael, and I all gathered at another restaurant. Afterward, we would celebrate our engagement with a private family meal, and both sides agreed to proceed with the wedding. However, it was during this gathering that my niece made a surprising statement. On that day, my niece was unusually restless from mourning. When I asked her why, she claimed that the hunter was moving around more than she'd ever seen. I tried to stay positive, thinking maybe my grandpa was nervous about my wedding. But when we arrived at the restaurant and took our seats, my niece spoke up before any greetings. "You should reconsider this guy," she said. The room fell silent. The adults wore indescribable expressions. My sister attempted to diffuse the tension, but I stopped her. "Why?" my sister asked. "Because the hunter is giving him a scary look, and I can't see his face." "There's too much hair," my niece replied. Michael shot an uncomfortable glance at my niece. Children have vivid imaginations, don't they? Maybe it's from TV. He attempted to lighten the mood, but his smile vanished, leaving him pale. Perhaps anyone would find my niece unusual upon first meeting her. Still, in that moment, I sensed Michael's narrow-mindedness as he twisted his face at a child. "I see. Maybe reconsider this guy. The hunter has been standing in front of you, Sophia, all this time. He's been brushing away the hair that keeps growing from this guy's head, and a white dog is angry." She pointed at Michael's mother. "A dog?" I asked. "Yes, the hair growing from his head has been bothering the white dog," my niece explained. Michael's mother's expression changed abruptly, and she immediately began apologizing. "I apologize. I don't need the money anymore. Consider this job non-existent." Job? Both my parents and I were puzzled, but it was Michael who responded with a barrage of insults. "Dan it, fulfill your role properly. I'll refund the money. I shouldn't have taken this job. I apologize. Your fault. It's all ruined. Enough. I won't allow hurtful words toward my loved ones." "Now what's going on?" I demanded. The truth revealed by his mother left us all dumbfounded. As it turns out, the person I believed to be Michael's mother was actually a hired staff member, a jack of all trades. In other words, she wasn't his mother. She knew it was wrong, but tempted by the money, she accepted the request. Despite her desperate apologies, I couldn't bring myself to blame her. At this point, marriage was the least of our concerns. But Michael was determined to salvage the situation. Tearfully, he said, "Sophia, I'm truly sorry for lying. But please understand, my mom couldn't be here due to her hospitalization. I truly care about you, and that's why I asked someone to play the role of my mom. My feelings for you are genuine. Please believe me." His eyes pleaded with me. "No, it's impossible," I replied. I replied without hesitation. What kind of marriage starts with a lie? Is this some B movie? This is real life. I won't marry under false pretenses. Let's consider this marriage null and void. Michael sighed and took a different approach. Fine, guess it's over. You're stingy anyway. What? Normally you'd help pay for your partner's mother's medical expenses. To you, $35,000 isn't a big deal. No, it's an enormous sum, I corrected him. That's why I called you stingy. I thought marriage would give me financial freedom. Well, if there's no marriage, then I guess I don't need to be here anymore. You're truly creepy. Wait. Michael was about to utter hurtful words to my niece again, but in that instant he scratched his neck and collapsed. In a hurry, we called an ambulance. When they asked about family members, there was no one there for Michael, so he was taken to the hospital alone. My niece chimed in. His hair was tangled around his neck, so it must have been painful. The tense atmosphere seemed to tighten even more. The white dog is smiling. That's great, my niece said to the woman who would pose as Michael's mother. She had been single and owned a dog. Recently, her dog had passed away, and she couldn't bear the loneliness. She had been working in a job that left her feeling desperate and burdened with guilt. However, now she was determined to find a proper job. After apologizing repeatedly, she left the restaurant. While he was after my money, it seems. How embarrassing. I apologize for inconveniencing everyone, I said, laughing nervously. My niece beamed, but my parents and sister remained unsmiling. Emma, can you really see these things? My sister asked. My parents and sister were more fascinated by my niece than by the fact that my marriage had fallen through. Well, I guess it's true sometimes. That lightens the heart. Is anyone with Mom? My sister continued. No one. Ah, I see. Well, let's eat a feast and then go home. It's my treat. Ultimately, we ended up having a family dinner and then returned home. Emma, thank you for today, I said to my niece after returning home, but she seemed contemplative. We shouldn't tell lies. Huh. Because I lied to Mom. What? There's always Dad by Mom's side, but it's a secret. Why? Dad is watching over Mom silently. I see, he must want to protect both you and Mom. From that moment on, my niece stopped mentioning what she could see. The adults around her, including me, avoided the topic. Although I hadn't seen Michael since he was taken to the hospital, 6 months had passed. One day, while watching TV, I nearly choked on my tea. The program featured women who had fallen victim to marriage scams. They united, hired detectives, and sought refunds from the con artists. The mosaic-covered scammer on screen looked unmistakably like Michael. The same tactics, claiming his mother had a terminal illness and needed advanced medical treatment, had ensnared women, some of whom had given over $70,000. Wow, I'm relieved I wasn't fooled. Thank you, Emma, my niece was smiling. 10 years later, my niece turned 18, and I entered my 40s. But a new encounter awaited me. Does marriage hold any meaning for me now, past the age of 40? Lost in thought, my niece approached and whispered, Sophia, this time it's genuine. You'll definitely be happy. Congratulations. Huh? 6 months later, I married and left my parents' home, enjoying blissful days. My niece had saved me countless times, and whether or not she possessed mysterious abilities, she remained dear to me. As an aunt who had received so much help, I genuinely wished for her happiness. Marriage scams are despicable. I hope victims receive their refunds swiftly. Let's strive to live honestly and righteously.